What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Dan Cave. And today I'm going to tell you the 12 most important characters to invest in when it comes to riff raids. Now, we've got a ton of information from the devs when it comes to riff raids, and I'm going to talk about the most important aspect, and that's going to be your roster. Each alliance is going to work together to take down these riff raids, and it's going to be very important that you are going to be able to contribute the most when it comes to that roster. Now, you're going to have different nodes when it comes to the minions, the sentinels, and that dreaded gatekeeper. And this is where it's going to get a little tricky. Now, what we've learned from the devs is not only are you going to have a certain roster to come in here, well, you're going to need certain traits because a lot of these battles are going to have restrictions. Now, I don't really like that word of restrictions because I feel like it just means something else. But realistically, you're going to have a requirement. So certain slots are going to require certain traits. And this is where it gets a little tricky when it comes to your roster. Now, if we look back at the image that the devs gave us, you can see right there that there are two different traits that are needed. Well, one of those, that's a pentagon. Yeah, that one is the one that's actually required, whereas the circle, that one's a bonus. So because we're seeing requirements, and you can see on these two different characters that both of them are actually needing royalty, well, this is where we want to look at that and determine how we build our entire roster and who we want to invest in, so that when we hit these types of nodes, we're prepared. So in order to prepare, we need to look at our roster and we need to try to hit as many traits as possible. And yes, I'm not saying you need to go out and invest in characters like Hook because he has tons of traits. Well, he's not really that good, so don't do that. But on the other hand, you want to make sure that you are hitting a lot of traits because you don't want to run into the opposite problem. Yeah, we're talking about you, Mulan. We don't want to run into that problem. So it's a really fine balancing act between that. And this is why I think these 12 Guardians are going to be the best bet. So moving into this picture, I just want to kind of really show you guys how many traits there are. And well, there's the list. So as we look at this list and as we start to really dive into it, you're going to see some of these characters are going to cover multiple traits and some of these are only going to cover a couple. But what I tried to do is break them down in between a couple of different roles. And I'm not talking about the specific roles inside the game because realistically, those aren't going to matter too much. But I wanted to break them into 3 different categories to where when you're making your team, you're going to have a lot of characters you can choose from to piece together to make the perfect team. So starting out with the teams, I want to look at the damage dealers. These are the characters that you're really going to use to leverage on all of your different battles. So I wanted to make sure we got a little bit of a different wide net when it comes to these characters. Now, to start it off, we're going with that tried and true Ariel. Now with Ariel, we're starting there because, well, she's so good. A lot of people use her, a lot of people have her, and you're going to notice she's going to hit a lot of traits on this list. So as we go through these traits, I'm going to mark over to the side so you can truly see that all these traits are being used. So with Ariel, we're going to be able to knock off Seafaring, Royalty, Gravity Defying, Blade Wielder, and Medium. Yes, that's a lot of traits, and she's a really, really good damage dealer. So as you can see, she's got a lot of traits, so this should be a good character that you can use in a lot of the battles here. Now this second Guardian, yes, a lot of people may not have her, but I did want to make sure that we bring her up and talk about her just a little bit. Yep, that's going to be Anna. Now Anna also has a pretty good amount of traits, but she is going to have some overlap with Ariel. So you have Fiery and Goofball. These are going to be the two that are different from Ariel, along with Royalty, Blade Wielder, and Medium. Now the big thing about Anna is if you haven't really looked at her kit, she does extra damage to Titanborns. And with the fact that the Gatekeeper is a Titanborn, she may be the all-star of riff raids, and this is the reason why I would say if you don't have her next time the event comes around, you may want to make sure you pick her up. Moving into that third Guardian, I have Mr. Incredible. Yes, he's not melee, but he is a damage dealer. Mr. Incredible is going to be pretty good because he's also going to hit Tall, Leader, Lawful, Short Fuse, and Pixar. So you can see right there, we have a lot of unique traits that we haven't seen on Anna and Ariel so far. And again, he's going to be really good when paired with certain Guardians. After that, I start to branch into range because I know some people really like range, and this brings us into Zerg. Zerg is also going to give us Tall, High Tech, Gravity Defying, Villainous, and Pixar. So Zerg is another one of those characters that may be hard if you don't have, but I'm telling you guys, when he comes back around, if you need somebody for high tech, if you need a ranged guardian, Zerg is the one you want to go with. And lastly, this is one of the characters that he's on my list, but of the 12, he's definitely near the bottom, and this is going to be Scar. Now, Scar is going to give us that shape shifting and that stealthy trait, so he is important for those two traits, but I'm not going to invest too much in him. He's definitely going to be on the lower end of my damage dealers, but having that fifth one, he will be nice specifically with those two traits. So these are the damage dealers. Again, I'm not investing too much outside of this. Now, when it comes to damage dealers, there are a couple others that are, I don't know if they're necessarily sleepers, but others that may be mentioned, like Aladdin, maybe Snow White, or Stitch, or a few others. But honestly, guys, when you look at the traits, they're going to overlap in a bunch of different areas. So just make sure when you are picking your guardians, you're really looking at your roster. And if none of them match this, use what you have. So moving into tanks, we have a few tanks here that I also like to use. And the first one's going to be Simba. Now, Simba just came through with his event. And if you haven't used him, he is so good. When it comes to his traits, you're going to get medium, royalty, goofball, and leader. Now, we've also seen these traits already on some of our damage dealers, but we also wanted to make sure that for every trait, we at least have 2 guardians that can actually meet those traits. This will help us if we ever run into a place where we need 2 of the same type. Yes, it is possible to have 3 on a particular node, and this is where you may have to work within your alliance if you can't cover 3 of the same kind. Now, in this list, there's only a couple traits out of these 12 guardians that don't have 3, but it is something to kind of note along the way. Next up, we have Wally, and Wally's going to give us short, Pixar, goofball, and high tech. Now, Wally is one of the best tanks. Him and Simba are pretty neck and neck depending on how you use them. So I included them here just because if you have them, you need to be using them. Next up is Oogie Boogie. Now, Oogie's one of those that he's lower on my list, but he is a pretty good tank. He's going to give us tall, villainous, scary, and goofball. Now, the scary trait is going to be pretty important because a lot of people don't have Jack Skelly yet, and hopefully Skelly's going to come pretty soon. But if you don't have that, you're going to need whether it's Oogie or Sully to take that scary trait. Lastly, we have Maui. And Maui's going to help us in a couple different areas because he's going to give us our second seafaring, as well as shape-shifting and fiery. Now, Maui's tall, but at this point, we've already taken care of most of the sizes. So those are my tanks. Now, there are some other tanks that are pretty good. Characters like Donald, Baymax, maybe even Sully or Genie, they're viable. But again, I'm trying to make sure that I'm leveraging as few guardians as I can with the most amount of traits that are actually going to be good to invest in, that can help you in towers and other places like that. So with that being said, I think these 4 guardians are all you're really going to need when it comes to tanks. So lastly, we're going to get into the healers. And the healers are really what's going to make your team excel when it comes to riff rates. The support guardians are what really drive any of the punching up in all of the different modes, and this is why it's very important to make sure that you're investing in the best ones. Now we're going to start with Jack Skelly, and again, I get it. If you're not beta, you don't have them yet, so you can look at them and you can go with someone else as you go through, but I'm telling you guys, once we can get him, you need to get him because he's so good. Jack's going to give us tall, scary, royalty, and leader. So if you're not going with the scary here, you definitely need to go with Oogie Boogie or Sully, but for me, in order to get the 2, I'm using my Oogie Boogie and I'm using Jack Skelly. Next up, we have Mickey. Now, Mickey is a little trait light, so he's only going to be short, leader, and gravity defying, but Mickey is the best healer in the game. So when we think about getting far into your riff raids and making sure that you can actually make it through, Mickey's going to be that character that can really push you because of his heals. So he makes the list because of that. But again, if you're free to play, you don't have Mickey, it's okay. There's definitely some other guardians on this list and other plug and plays that you can use. So after Mickey, we get to Hero. Now, Hero is one of my favorite guardians when it comes to support. He practically goes into almost every team I use, and he's going to give you some pretty good traits. We have medium, high tech, gravity defying, book smart, and leader. So this is our first book smart, and there's not too many characters with that trait. So going back to tanks, if you need somebody like Baymax, he can give you a second book smart. We've also got characters like Bell and other healers that maybe didn't make it into my top 12, but surely can plug and play if you need them. Next up is going to be Scrooge. So a lot of people have Scrooge in their S tier. I have him personally in my A tier, but he's definitely one of the better healers when it comes to the game. So Scrooge is also going to give you short, Fortune Seeker, High Tech, and Leader. So again, that Fortune Seeker is going to be pretty important as a trait because there's not too many Guardians that actually have that trait. His heals are pretty good, and his focus buffs are really going to help some of those teams do the increased damage that they need. And lastly, to round out these characters, I have Violet. She is one of those Guardians that can really push you, and if you're struggling on any of those matches with ranged Guardians, if you've already used Dora, you've seen how good she is, well, Violet's even better. I have a feeling when it comes to Rift Raids, there's going to be a few nodes that are going to be very difficult because of the ranged aspect of them, and Violet's going to be able to come in and pretty much break that stalemate, add those shields, and really help your team get through those ranged nodes in order to get further in the Rift Raids. Now, when it comes back to her traits, we've also got Medium, Stealthy, Gravity Defying, Lawful, and Pixar. So she's adding to that Stealthy like we talked about before, and she should round out the team very well. Now, I know I've been saying 12 Guardians and I just read you 14, but like I said, when it comes to Oogie Boogie and Scar, they're at the bottom of my list, so the 12 would be the other ones, not including those two, and the 14 would include those two, whereas I really think that you're probably going to need the 12 plus a few depending on how well your alliance can do. Now, if your alliance is actually going out and really getting a diversity of characters, then you may be able to stick with only 10 or so, and that way you're being able to share the load throughout the Rift. And on the other hand, you may need to go out to 20 Guardians. It really just depends on how much you're doing compared to how much everybody else in the alliance is doing. And I think there's a bunch of runner-ups, just like I mentioned, with characters like Donald, maybe a Baymax or something like that. But I really do feel like these 12 to 14 are going to be the perfect ones to go after. Now, this is always a conversation, and I'm really interested to know down in the comments, who do you guys think are going to be the top Guardians when it comes to Rift Raids? Who are the Guardians you've already invested in that you think are better than these? Let me know down below, because I'm really interested so that we can put all this stuff together as raids come, and hopefully we can work together to find the best teams and the best runs through Rift Raids. Now, we have 2 weeks until Rift Raids drops, and I'm sure there's more information coming. Yeah, we just got an announcement from D23 about the villains, and who knows, we may see a couple other Guardians that actually take away some of these spots and they end up being the best instead of some of these outliers that we're going to be using. So let me know down below, guys, what do you think? Make sure you hit that sub button while you're down there. And if you haven't really dug into Rift Raids, definitely check out that video. I'll put it right there, guys. Make sure to check it out, because that's the one where we do the deeper dive on the Rift Raids, and it's going to get you more prepared in order to take these things down once they drop. So as always, guys, y'all take it easy.